In Singapore, murder is one of the few crimes that warrants the mandatory death penalty, and this uncompromising stance extends beyond murder, encompassing other crimes such as drug trafficking and firearms-related offences. Although Singapore is widely regarded as one of the safest nations in the world, despite its stringent measures against criminals and firm stance on capital punishment, every now and then, one hears about a horrifically violent act of crime. On May the 11th, 1974, the Singapore police received an anonymous call. The caller's words sent shockwaves through the entire police station, freezing every officer in their tracks. A passerby had stumbled upon a pair of dismembered legs, cruelly severed at the knees, within a public restroom located near a mosque in Aljunied Road. Within no time at all, the police were summoned to the scene, as well as a pathologist who swiftly confirmed that the legs, unmistakably belonging to a woman, had been viciously removed only hours prior to the discovery. This left the police completely baffled, but they recognized the urgency of solving this case, particularly considering the sheer amount of media attention that it would attract. Then they grappled with a grisly realization. Just 2 days earlier, they had received a missing persons report. A 53-year-old woman by the name of Quek Lay Eng had set out from her residence at around 8:30 in the morning. Her intention, as she said to her sons, was to visit her sister-in-law. Yet, as dusk descended and the hours grew long, there was no sign of her return to her home in Senate Estate. Anxiety gnawed at her family as their search proved futile, prompting them to escalate their concern by filing a report at Paya Lebar police station. As the missing persons case collided with the discovery of severed legs, the police began piecing together a macabre link between the limbs and the vanished woman. Their pursuit led them to the suspected culprit's doorstep. Yet, as they approached, an overwhelming stench choked the air, threatening to reveal a darkness far more sinister than they had anticipated. This unexpected turn hinted at a depth of horror lurking within. You're listening to Heinous, an Asian true crime podcast, brought to you by MediaCorp and produced by One Up Media. This episode may contain sensitive details and graphic imagery. Listener discretion is advised. On the morning of May 9th, 1974, the house of 44-year-old Joo Keow was quiet and warm. Most of her 6 children had not yet woken up, so this was the perfect opportunity for her to leave the house uninterrupted. But as the sun began to filter through the curtains, Sim appeared in the midst of a flurry. She stood near the doorway, her hand rummaging through her bag, seemingly searching for something. At the same time, her daughter Quek Lay descended the stairs cautiously, noticing her mother's anxious demeanor. With a tone of concern, Quek asked about her mother's sudden departure, curious as to where she was heading. "I'm just going out for a while. I'll be back soon." Several hours elapsed before Sim returned, and when she did, her face was marked by evident signs of distress upon entering the house. As she noticed her daughter Quek approaching, an unexpected surge of anxiety coursed through Sim. "So, where did you go, Mom? You've been out all morning, you haven't said a word." Sim had anticipated her daughter's question and was now scrambling to conjure a believable response on the spot. I was just... Let me tell you, something really strange happened today. You remember Madam Quek? I was supposed to meet her at the bus stop to sort out some money matters just now. But things got really bizarre. A car had pulled up in front of us, and there were 2 people inside. Madam Quek wanted me to get in with her, but of course I declined. Sim's daughter Quek wouldn't know then, but her mother was hiding a horrific secret. 53-year-old Madam Quek Lay Eng was the wife of a wealthy local textile merchant. Her husband was a respected figure in the textile trade who held a prominent standing within the industry. But he was also part of a Tontine scheme, which was and still is illegal in many parts of the world. The roots of a Tontine scheme trace back to the 17th century. It's a hybrid of a group annuity and a lottery system. How it works is that it requires each participant to contribute a specified amount of money into a collective investment pool from which annual dividends are distributed. The scheme operates on a morbid principle. As participants pass away, their shares are reallocated among the remaining members, augmenting the annual payouts for survivors. It only ends when the last member draws their final breath, and in some cases, the entire fund is given to the last survivor. However, the allure of potential wealth has also led to the darker side of Tontine schemes. The competitive nature to outlive others for a greater share has historically sparked disputes, deception, and even tragic crimes among members vying for increased payouts. After all, smaller Tontine groups where everyone knows each other very well makes the perfect setup for a murder mystery to occur. Why? That's because it creates a situation similar to being in a small group with close friends. Everyone trusts each other a lot, and therefore it becomes tricky to find a culprit if something goes wrong. Given Madam Quek's husband's involvement in the scheme, it's no surprise that she would also be a member herself. After all, these schemes often involve close family ties, and it's common for spouses to participate in such arrangements together. According to the records, both Sim and Madam Quek shared a good relationship. Sim was involved in Madam Quek's Tontine group, likely earning well from regular investments. But everything changed on the fateful morning of May 9, 1974. Reports state that when Madam Quek departed from her home, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. It was just another routine day. She had mentioned to her sons that she was going to visit her sister-in-law before stepping out of her door around 8:30 in the morning. However, as the hours ticked by and dusk descended without her return, concern gradually ripened into worry within the Quek household. Worried that something terrible might have befallen Madam Quek, her family swiftly took action, making their way down to the Paya Lebar police station to seek assistance. They encountered an initial hurdle, as standard protocol dictated a 24-hour waiting period before filing a missing persons report. But despite this regulation, the authorities at the police station, perhaps moved by the urgency etched across the family's faces, or considering the Quek family's high profile, decided to accept the report and list her down as a missing person. They acknowledged that there was a possible threat looming over Madam Quek's disappearance. But what they didn't know was that she was already dead. On May 11, 1974, a disturbing discovery jolted the authorities. A pair of legs, cruelly severed at the knees, was discovered within the confines of a public restroom that was near a mosque in Aljunied Road. Forensic pathologists then confirmed that the legs belonged to those of a woman, which led the police to establish a chilling link between this disturbing discovery and the missing persons report filed for Madam Quek 2 days ago. While the details about the crime are vague, the unfolding events suggest a grim narrative. The police first had to deliver the devastating news to the Quek family before bringing each of them into the station for questioning. Within the confines of that chilling room, the statements of her family members pointed to an alarming detail. Madam Quek's last known whereabouts traced back to her sister-in-law's residence, Joo Keow, a name that once resonated with family and trust, now cast a foreboding shadow in a sinister turn of events. As news of the severed legs sent tremors through Singapore, Sim immediately made a call to her husband, Quek Lay Eng. While the exact words she said remain a mystery, the tone in her voice over the phone must have been laced with desperation and fear. When the conversation ended, her husband Quek was reported to have rushed home in a frenzy. The weight of the situation hung heavily as he stepped into the house. His senses were assaulted by the air thick with the stench of decay. What he saw made his heart pound with unease and a sense of impending dread. In his statement to the authorities, Quek Lay Eng vividly described the haunting scene. On the ground floor of their home, where they had a massive earthen jar, blood was seen slowly trickling down its sides. Nearby, a swarm of flies swirled in a dance, while an unmistakable pungent odor lingered in the air. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one. On the morning of May 9th, 1974, 53-year-old Madam Quek left her home and embarked on a significant mission. Her footsteps echoed purposefully along the familiar paths, leading her to her sister-in-law's residence on Upper Kallang Road. The purpose of this visit? To reclaim a considerable debt, an owed sum of $2,000. Back then, this sum carried considerable significance, translating to over $11,000 in today's value when considering inflation. Such a substantial amount had the potential to completely change one's quality of life. Madam Quek and her sister-in-law, Joo Keow, had arranged to meet for a financial settlement, a planned resolution to their monetary dealings. Yet what began as a rendezvous meant for settling debts quickly spiraled into an appalling turn of events. Accounts depict an abrupt shift from a simple discussion to a scene of horror. By the meeting's end, it etched an unprecedented and ghastly chapter in Singapore's history, a horrific murder case which marked the nation's first instance of dismemberment since gaining independence in 1965. Madam Quek's fate was beyond gruesome. She wasn't just brutally dismembered, pieces of her body were also carelessly abandoned and left to rot across Singapore. What's most disturbing about this crime is the heinous act of not just ending a life, but desecrating it further by scattering the victim's remains as macabre markers across the cityscape. As the police uncovered evidence of Madam Quek's murder, it led them down a chilling trail that unveiled disturbing findings in locations such as the Kallang River and even within the confines of Joo Keow's own home. You're listening to Heinous, an Asian true crime podcast, brought to you by MediaCorp and produced by One Up Media. This episode may contain sensitive details and graphic imagery. Listener discretion is advised. In the book, The Economics of Inequality, French economist Thomas Piketty mentions that in the past, the world of investing was exclusively meant for the rich, people with so much wealth and influence that it could span across multiple lifetimes. That's exactly true for people living in the 1970s, an era when access to investments or insurance remained a privilege unattainable for the average person in Singapore. While the wealthy had access to these specialized financial services, the general workforce, relying on fixed interest rates from banks and financial institutions, had limited avenues for wealth-building opportunities. You see, in those days, people felt more comfortable when they entrusted their life savings to familiar faces rather than large financial institutions. There was a prevailing distrust towards banks, even though there were no recorded instances of a bank fleeing with people's life savings. The personal connection and perceived reliability within these smaller community-driven schemes instilled a greater sense of assurance and comfort among many people, which was one of the biggest reasons why Tontine schemes thrived during that period. The way Tontine schemes work is very similar to that of a lottery or a group annuity. The main goal is to create a group savings fund where every participant contributes regularly, which then accumulates and generates returns, typically in the form of interest or dividends. What distinguishes Tontine schemes is their unique yet slightly morbid redistribution method. As members pass away, their shares are reallocated among the surviving participants until the last surviving member ultimately receives the entirety of the fund. While it sounds promising, these arrangements are not without risks. The dependency on consistent contributions and the reliance on fellow participants' continued involvement pose inherent vulnerabilities. If any of the members failed to contribute on time or made premature withdrawals, the stability of these schemes could be compromised, impacting the expected returns. From the reports, it's pretty clear that both Madam Quek and her sister-in-law, Joo Keow, were part of a Tontine scheme. In fact, Madam Quek even took a leading role in overseeing the entire operation of this financial arrangement. Some critics say that because Madam Quek was the head of the Tontine group, she might have amassed considerable wealth at the possible expense of her sister-in-law. In these schemes, the organizers or administrators benefit through various avenues. They often charge administrative fees, which would either be a percentage of the total funds or a fixed amount. Furthermore, organizers usually have control over how the pooled funds are invested. In some instances, they might also claim a share of the profits generated from these funds, offering them an extra source of income besides the managing fees. Sources available don't specify the reasons behind Joo Keow owing money to Madam Quek, yet the likeliest scenario points to Sim potentially missing a payment or two, so she must have promised Madam Quek that she'd pay up to stay in the scheme. Multiple sources indicate that Madam Quek failed to return home after her meeting with Sim, prompting her family to report her missing to the authorities. 2 days later, the police received a report about a grim discovery: a pair of legs along Aljunied Road, later confirmed by pathologists to belong to a woman. This revelation swiftly led the police to draw connections between the two cases, sparking a search for Joo Keow. The following day, when the police arrived at Sim's residence, they were greeted by an overwhelming stench that threatened to repel even the most seasoned investigators. The smell was an ominous precursor to the horrors concealed within. And it lingered, thickly in the air, almost suffocating. Inspector Daniel Tan from the Special Investigations Section confronted Sim, who he described to have a nervous yet determined look on her face.
"I want to tell you everything,"
she uttered, her voice unwavering as she cast a glance towards the ground. To the police, this was an act of confession, and she was immediately arrested. Sim led the authorities to the spots where she had concealed Madam Quek's belongings. With each step, the tension escalated, the weight of the unfolding revelations palpable in the air. Then, with an eerie calmness, she led Inspector Tan into the kitchen. And there in the corner, she pointed to a chopper that was used to dismember Madam Quek.
"Where did you do it? Where did you cut it out?"
Inspector Tan asked with a firm voice. She directed him to the bathroom, admitting to the gruesome acts that took place within. Yet, as Inspector Tan carefully examined the bathroom, skepticism began to creep in. Looking at the walls and the crevices in the bathroom floor tiles, there were no signs of blood to be found. Online, there are very few photographs that depict Joo Keow's appearance. Among the few available, one particular image captures her emotive moment, tears streaming down her face as she's escorted out of court upon receiving her sentence. Captured in the photograph, she appears with short shoulder-length hair and dons a sleeveless patterned shirt. Her hands shield her eyes while she turns away from the camera as the photographer snaps the photo. Sim appeared reluctant to be photographed, possibly aware of her actions or feeling ashamed for being caught in a lie, especially after her own daughter called her out to tell the truth. On the day of the murders, May 9th, Inspector Tan called Sim in for questioning as Madam Quek was last seen at her residence. At the time, no one knew about Madam Quek's death or Sim's connection to it. Hence, Sim was merely requested to visit the station and give a statement on the missing persons case. As Sim faced the interview, her daughter sat outside the room, probably because there was no one at home to look after the child. It was not uncommon during the 1970s for parents to bring their children along in such situations. However, in this case, it might have cost Sim's freedom, as it was her daughter who alerted the authorities about her mother's lies.
So, where did you go, Mom? You've been out all morning.
You haven't said a word.
As Sim conversed with the police, her daughter could overhear their exchanges and noticed a conflicting story emerging. Her mother Sim was lying to the police. Then came a sudden knock at the door, interrupting their conversation.
Mom, stop lying to the policeman. That's not what you told me.
Reports suggest that Sim had shared two different accounts of the incident with her daughter Quek Lay. Initially, she mentioned that Madam Quek had arranged to meet her at a bus stop, intending to resolve a financial issue. However, a car suddenly arrived carrying a man and a woman. Madam Quek invited Sim into the car, but Sim declined. Later, she altered her story, stating that Madam Quek had visited her home accompanied by a couple. According to Sim, a disagreement over money later escalated between the couple and Madam Quek. Sim alleged that the man then attacked Madam Quek with a knife and punched her in the eye when she attempted to intervene. In response, she ran out of the house and upon her return, found it empty. Inspector Tan then accompanied Sim to her residence but found no discernible odor or evidence of foul play. This was the same day that Quek was reported missing, but 2 days before the discovery of her dismembered legs. The timeline raised questions about the circumstances leading to Quek's demise and the subsequent dismemberment. Did Sim cut off Quek's legs on the day of the murders and conceal them immediately, or did she wait for 2 days before she began the dismemberment?
I want to tell you everything. I want to tell you everything. I want to tell you everything.
On May 11, 1974, Sim was promptly arrested and eventually confessed to the crime. With mounting evidence and being called out for lying by her own daughter in front of the police, Sim had no option but to reveal the truth. She guided the police to the various locations where she committed the crime and where she had hid the rest of the body. However, the police were completely unprepared for the horrific truth. Sim hadn't just dismembered Madam Quek into 2 parts, but into multiple pieces. She first led the police to a massive earthen jar placed on the ground level, and upon opening it, she took out a plastic bag that had the logo of the renowned department store, Yao Han. The bag bore dried bloodstains and emitted a strong, pungent odor. Upon opening it, they discovered Madam Quek's upper torso inside. Later, a similar plastic bag was found in another jar upstairs near the kitchen, which contained the lower portion of Madam Quek's torso. As Sim was leading the police around the house, another team of investigators scoured the streets of Singapore in search of the remaining body parts, particularly the head and the arms. Right when they were on the verge of calling off the search, their efforts were rewarded when they detected a foul odor emanating from the vicinity of the Kallang River bank. Tracing the stench, it led them to a cardboard parcel along the riverbank, within which Madam Quek's head and arms were discovered. During the police interrogation, Sim made a grisly confession to the sequence of events. She claimed that when Madam Quek visited her home to collect the money she owed her, an argument broke out between the two women. Madam Quek was extremely firm that she would be collecting the money, and as their voices grew louder, Sim's apprehension soared. Suddenly, a surge of rage seized Sim, and her hands tightened around Madam Quek's neck, a desperate attempt to quell the escalating confrontation. Eventually, Madam Quek collapsed and lay motionless, leaving Sim to grapple with the horrifying reality. Driven by desperation, she resorted to a chilling method, employing a meat chopper to gruesomely dismember the body, forcefully hammering it down with a block of wood. She claimed to have witnessed fishmongers at the market employing a similar technique to cut their produce, and used the same technique to dismember Madam Quek's corpse. However, Inspector Tan's observation of the absence of bloodstains in the bathroom raises intriguing questions. Did she conduct the dismemberment elsewhere, or did she meticulously sanitize the bathroom to erase any traces of her heinous act? On May 13, 1974, news of the murder spread throughout Singapore, and the air outside the Supreme Court buzzed with anticipation. Approximately 500 onlookers had gathered, hoping to catch a glimpse of the cold-hearted killer. Sim was eventually brought into the stark confines of the courtroom and charged with first-degree murder. A week later, on May 20th, a second mention of her case led to Sim being remanded for psychiatric evaluation at Woodbridge Hospital. By July 30th, a 2-day preliminary inquiry convened, which ultimately determined her committed to stand trial. 6 months later, Sim, in a courtroom heavy with the weight of anticipation and scrutiny, faced a verdict. Convicted of manslaughter and deliberately concealing evidence, Sim Joo Keow was sentenced to 10 years in prison. At only 45 years old when she was jailed, Sim would have been released at 55. Today, Sim would be 94 years old. However, her current status, whether she's dead or alive, remains shrouded in mystery.
Heinous, an Asian true crime podcast, is brought to you by MediaCorp and OneUp Media. This episode was produced and written by Guangjin, edited by Alex, narrated by Jason, audio experience by Ethan Sam, additional engineering by Ashley from OneUp Media. Special thanks to executive producer Danny Cordy from MediaCorp. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.